Good morning.
Morning.
How are you?
Okay. You?
Doing all right. Today it's hitting me that I didn't go to Phoenix because I would have been there by now.
I know it's really tough.
Yeah.
But I saw on there was an article in the Washington Post yesterday about the airports.
Yeah.
And there's a surge in travelers. It was pretty they said it was pretty crowded, but pretty scary.
Yeah. Well, I would have driven, but nonetheless.
Yeah, no, I don't think it's safe.
It's a matter of gathering together with groups of people, and that's the issue. And and it's not just Thanksgiving Day, because then my brother would have had an outdoor. My brother does it in the backyard in Phoenix, and we would have all worn masks. It's all the time together for 2 weeks, and and everybody's going out and doing their thing and whatever. And
yeah, you don't know who people are coming into contact with. That's the whole thing.
Yep.
And this is temporary. I think we're going to get through this. I think next year at this time, it's going to be much better.
Yeah, the fact that a virus came out is what enabled me to make the decision to stay home. If we were looking at a couple more years, I basically would have said, there are risks you have to take. But if there's an end in sight, I can be a lot more cautious.
Yeah, yesterday at Services, Jeff Actor spoke. You weren't at Services, right?
No, I took Shabbos off.
Yeah, anyway, he spoke about the situation and basically implored people to, stay home. He said there is light at the end of the tunnel, and he talked about 3 vaccines. People asked questions. So I think it, assuaged a lot of people's concerns. But it's not much longer. He said we're all going to probably be able to get one of the vaccines by the end of the second quarter, beginning of the third quarter.
I kind of assumed May, June. Yeah.
And as we see those cases, then we'll start seeing cases coming down, way down.
Yeah.
We're still going to have to be careful, but I don't think we're going to be in the situation we're in today.
That would be good. Hi, Barbara.
Can't wait.
Hello, Aaron.
Hi, Aaron.
Hello.
How are you, Aaron?
I'm here.
I don't see you. I only see your name.
I could put my vision on too, but I'm going to be going back and forth and doing all kinds of stuff while I listen.
All good. Glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
What do we have? We have another 3-4 minutes. Okay, we're good.
Your substitute was not as good, but this morning, but it's okay.
What was that?
I said your substitute was not as good. No, I'm being facetious.
I don't want to know. Don't tell me who it was then. I don't want to know.
No, he's fine. He's young and fine.
Is that Jonas? I assume.
Yes.
Why are you in a face, Joyce? I guess that's a picture. That's not her. Okay.
That's just a photo.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's what I realized.
Yeah.
No, Miso, what's with Toronto? I'm hearing it's pretty bad there with COVID all of a sudden.
Unmute, Nomi. Unmute. Nomi.
She's
I'm
trying.
trying. I'm pressing and nothing's happening. We're going into lockdown tomorrow for at
Yeah.
least 30 days.
How many? 30?
At least 28 days. I rounded it to 30. At least.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Canada has, been pretty unscathed for a long time, but seems to be spreading.
Yep.
Yeah, well, my son is in LA and they're under curfew as well as lockdown.
Oh,
Oh, yeah.
wow.
Yeah,
Oh, my.
10 p.m. to 6 a.m.
Wow.
Wow. Really.
Yeah.
And it's snowing today,
Oh,
which is pretty.
Yeah.
actually.
It's pretty from indoors and one day. I do not miss it.
me either. I would not want to live in a cold climate.
I do not. It's very beautiful while it's falling, and then the dogs get out, and the car exhaust, and everything. It doesn't look quite as nice.
Right now it's falling.
Yes.
To quote my mother, send me a postcard.
Well, some of you may
Right.
want to come to Florida where the state is open and you can eat outside every night because the restaurants are open, the weather is great, and the ocean is the perfect temperature.
Well, it's like that here too. You can eat outside, you can sit on the beach. It's very, very nice.
except that it just encourages the spread.
Right, and except that you can get sick.
Right. Other than that, it's fine.
Yeah, but you can sit outside, you can sit
On
in
the
the
beach.
yard, you can actually
Yeah.
go to the beach and just,
Yeah, there was nothing.
Yeah.
I'm avoiding.
Very breezy. People are far away.
I
yeah,
went I
really.
went up to the park the other day and sat, and there was nobody around. It was very beautiful.
You
Yeah.
went through Eastern Glade.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I think we're going to get started. We've got, oh, wow, 26 people already, 27 people, whatever. All right, so let's mute everyone and we'll get started. All right, Boker Tov, everyone. So far we've dealt with the the antecedents of Christian anti-Semitism over the first 6 centuries. Last week we encountered Muslim antecedents of Islamic antecedents from 7th century to the 10th century. Today we're picking up with the 11th century, the 1000s. All right. By the end of this period, Muslim Turks, okay, are threatening Constantinople, which is the capital of the Byzantine Empire at this point. All right, and the emperor, who's also the head of the Greek Orthodox Church, appeals to the Pope Urban II, for help. They're being threatened by the Muslim Turks, and they're appealing to the Pope for help. The Pope responds by ordering and calling for a holy war. The holy war would later be called a crusade. It's the first of several crusades. Crusade essentially means a war for the cross, okay? And Jews are deeply affected by the crusades, even though seemingly they have nothing to do with the goal as laid out. All right, so that's where we're starting today. Going back a little bit into the 7th century, okay, only a few Jews lived in Northern Europe. Many of the earliest arrivals were former soldiers in the Roman army, or they were traders who followed those armies. Traders, they were taking care of the needs of the army as they went. They were bringing products. By the 8th century, 100 years later, more Jews had settled in the region, many coming the way of the old Roman trade routes. And by 900, a growing number of Jewish families that were living in the valley of the Moselle River, which is now in France and Germany. 100 years later, by the year 1000, some were moving to the Rhineland, the valley of Germany's Rhine River. So you've got this from the 7th century on, a constant influx of Jews into Northern Europe. And what they found as they settled essentially was a frontier society in which war is commonplace. Think the Wild West, all right, without a national government of any sort. As a result, what you've got is a land in which there are repeated invasions by nomadic tribes, powerful men, each with their own army of warriors and knights loyal to them only, and ruling a section of the land. Each keeps the peace for their own people and protects the less powerful in exchange for goods and services. So you've got this sort of wildness that's going on all over Northern Europe. The only unifying force in this community, in this whole section of the continent, is the Roman Catholic Church, headed by the Pope. The church struggles to unite Christians in this world by keeping alive Roman law and learning. Missionaries spread out throughout Northern Europe to convert pagans and to stamp out any form of heresy. So you have a sense of what this world is like. And the question then becomes, well, how do the Jews fit into that craziness? After all, they could not take an oath of loyalty, all right, to the lords and become his vassals. To do so would have been to swear their loyalty to the Christian church. And in a sense, there's an element of almost conversion in so doing. And so they are precluded from being part of the larger society. All right. As I noted before, most of the Jews arrived in the 8th and 9th centuries in Northern Europe, and they were perceived as immigrants. And you know, immigrants are rarely well received and enthusiastically received by host societies. It's not the norm. Beyond their newness to the community, Jews also constituted the only non-Christian group left in society. The pagans essentially had been either killed and or converted, and Muslims essentially kept themselves separate. So you've got the Muslims essentially controlling much of Southern Europe, while the Christians are controlling essentially most of Northern Europe. And never the twain shall meet. They really don't interact unless it's a case of war. So you've got Jews as the only non-Christian people living there, and you've got Jews living there who are now a new economic competition for the people living in that society. You can imagine they're not beloved by the mass population in general. As for the timing of this all happening, the region's economy, Northern Europe's economy, is just beginning to recover from centuries of war and invasion. There's a unity that's starting to take place, and with it, economic recovery. And because the Christians themselves had needed to concentrate for so long on protection, on engaging in battle from invaders, the Jews among them had skills, experiences, and contacts that were enabled them to revive the trade. The Christians were not traders. They were too busy being warriors. The Jews among them, as a result, had an advantage in the world of trade. And so for help, a number of the rulers turned to the Jewish merchants who had lived in the Mediterranean region for years and generations before making their way north. And they were experienced in doing business both, and this is key, both with Christians and Muslims, all right? They were able to be the crossover because they were small enough not really to be threats to either society. All right, so the Christians and Muslims kept themselves separate. Jews were able to go back and forth because they were not a threat. The Jews had other examples, other advantages as well in this process. Number one, they weren't tied to land. The Christians were landowners. The Jews could move all over the place because they didn't own any land. They weren't allowed to, but they didn't own land, and so they were much more mobile. They were also literate at a time in which the vast majority of Europeans could neither read nor write. The last advantage they had, a third advantage they had, was they were familiar with a new numbering system used in the Muslim world, the decimal system. Christians were still using Roman numerals. And so Jews had a better sense of math, per se. My brother would be proud. The other piece of this here, this numbering system, the negative of that, this numbering system, which the Jews were using, only further enhanced their position as different among the Christian society. All right. Again, we have the sense we've gotten used to the metric system, but I remember when they introduced the metric system when I was in school, feeling of that's foreign. That's the foreign way of thinking. Okay. We've gotten a lot more accustomed to it, but in the 70s, I'm sitting in a classroom and they're teaching me something, a whole new numerical system that I don't want anything to do with that. That's not me. All right. We've overcome that. But it just enhanced the Jews' position as the other. So did, for the great majority of the Christians in the society, the citizens, the fact that the Jewish business dealings were primarily with the nobles. All right. In a society of hunger and scarcity of resources, ordinary people could not afford the exotic spices and the fancy cloth that a number of Jewish merchants brought to Northern Europe. Most Jews, all right, so you have the sense of because of what they're dealing with, the commodities they're dealing with, they're still the other to the large population. Most Jews, however, who were living there were not involved in the trade business, but worked as dyers, as shoemakers, blacksmiths, butchers, scribes, winemakers, physicians, other odd jobs in the society. And what those Jews did is arouse in the general society a sense of competition. And we know how that plays in society. The outcome of all that is, despite sharing many of the same problems as the Christians, fire and flood and epidemics, as well as fighting together in defense of towns and cities, friendships were rare between Jews and Christians. Jews were the other. Religious barriers are also a barrier. Religious differences are also a barrier to close ties. All right. So although almost every religion in some way teaches respect for individual differences, believers often see non-believers as misguided and blind to the truth, but sometimes also as devious, dangerous, or even treacherous. And many Christians were particularly troubled by the Jews' refusal to accept Jesus as the Messiah. After all, Christians found what they understood to be predictions of Jesus's return to earth throughout the Hebrew scriptures. For the Christian of the time, the Jewish Bible predicts Jesus. Okay? Why, they wondered then, would Jews interpret those passages differently and insist that the prophets were speaking about events of their own times rather than anticipating the coming of Jesus? All right, that is a major problem. To these Christians, the idea that Jews would deny the truth was so outrageous that it could only have one explanation: Jews were in partnership with the devil. And you see the beginnings of real problems coming from that idea. All right. So if Jews are in partnership with the devil, why then would they be allowed to live in the same society among Christians? And the answer dates back to about the 4th century. We spoke of St. Augustine, all right, in 2 lectures ago. Augustine maintained that the church had a responsibility to keep Jews alive because of their connection to Jesus, who was a Jew. Augustine regarded the Jews as a permanent reminder that Christianity had replaced Judaism as the ultimate faith, as the true faith, and he argues that Jewish humiliation and loss of power become a way of showing what happens to those who disregard and reject God's truth. If we keep these people among us and we punish them, They are symbolic of what happens to those who reject Christianity. And for many Christians, showing contempt for Jews became an affirming of their own faith. I can show what a good Christian I am by rejecting anything to do with Judaism. As early as the 9th century, Christians in a number of French towns had a custom of assaulting a Jew and Jews in general at Easter time. Each year in Toulouse, religious leaders forced a Jew to stand in the town center and receive slaps in the face. The idea, again, is to humiliate the Jews, not to kill them, or even to go so far as to frighten them out of town. We just want to humiliate them. All right? Leaders of the Christian church issued edicts making it a sin for a Christian to eat with a Jew, to work with a Jew, or to visit a synagogue. The eating with a Jew wasn't a problem because Jews had kashrut and they weren't so willing to eat with the Christians either. So it kind of worked out well on that one. All right, so you have a sense. Any comments or questions yet? Yes, Joyce. This is one of the disadvantages of Zoom. I can't sort of read the room. Yes, Joyce.
Yeah, now what did you say about Augustine? He regarded the Jews as a way for Jesus to come. Well,
No. What he's saying is that there's a place for Jews in society because of the fact that Jesus was a Jew. This is what Augustine is saying.
Okay.
However, they are permanent reminders of people who reject Jesus, and so therefore they to be humiliated and to suffer, not to be killed or asked to leave town, just to endure their suffering. Okay. One of the principles of feudal society during the Middle Ages was the right to settle land, work a farm, practice a trade. These were privileges granted by kings, barons, and bishops and other feudal landlords. People entered into contracts of confidence and loyalty based on a premise of some mutual gain, such as the right to work the land in return for paying taxes off the land. So I would let you come onto my land, work the land, take the produce from the land. Your job was to pay me taxes based on that. So you could support your family. I earned, as a feudal lord, I earned the profits of the taxes. These essentially were contracts of social hierarchy, starting at the bottom between the peasants and the landlords and rising to the pledges of loyalty between the knights, the barons, and the kings. Tradesmen and artisans were also bound by similar contracts. They joined guilds through an oath of loyalty to keep the secrets of the trade away from the uninitiated. All right, we want to keep what we do, how we do it, secret. We've got to. I guess it's a form of a patent. All right, no one can know exactly what we're doing. These trade secrets were disclosed only after a prolonged period of apprenticeship in the master's home. Okay, so you've got a lot of society building on relationships and loyalty to vows. There's a social and economic bond that is built upon a confidence in another man's oath. How did it be? Hold on one second. Let me see the question.
If you have time.
All right. How does it begin? Again, the owning of land is part of Christian rights. I mean, they're the only non-Christians. Okay, and it's a form of taxation. So Jews are only granted privileges, social privileges, under certain kinds of special circumstances. There are 3 legal documents that King Louis the Pious, the son of Charlemagne, also known as Louis I, he allows certain Jews by name to purchase land, to work, to employ workers, and to practice trades. But this really is the unusual. and it's limited to certain Jews by name, as I mentioned. This is not commonplace, all right? The earliest known example of trade and settlement privileges granted to the larger Jewish community comes only in the second half of the 11th century. It's known as the Privilegium. It's granted in 1084 to Jews of Speyer by the town's bishop, Rudiger. All right, and so what I want to do here is read this. Those of you in the mountain class may remember this reading. I found it powerful enough to include it in what we're doing here. It wasn't presented as part of anti-Semitism just at the time, but I think it's an important document. All right, let's see. Martin Ginsburg, do you have the text? Would you begin for reading one? And somewhere along the way, Sandy, would you pick up halfway through?
I do not have the text.
All right, Sandy, would you begin? And Naomi, would you pick up halfway through?
Can you hear me?
We can hear you. This is document one.
Okay. In the name of the Holy Trinity, which is not divided, I, Rudiger, also called by the name Heusman, Bishop of Speyer, hereby turning the town Speyer into a city, have thought to enhance greatly the honor of our city by bringing Jews to settle here within. And the Jews that I have brought have settled outside of the community and away from the place where the other residents live. And in order to ensure that they are not vulnerable to the attacks of the common folk, I have surrounded them with a wall. And the place of their settlement, which I have personally acquired legally and justly, for this hill I have myself purchased, one part in silver and one part in trade, and the valley I have received as a gift from its owners, I have given over to them on condition that every year they pay 3.5 pounds in silver for the general needs of the brothers, the monks. I've given them the right to trade in silver and gold, to buy and sell as they see fit within their settlement and outside as far as the harbor and the boats. The right has been granted within the rest of the town as well. In addition, I have given them a plot of church land for a cemetery. To this, I have added that a strange Jew who comes to visit with them is not obliged to pay a custom charge.
As the ruler of a city amongst its citizens, so is the arch-synagogus, Rosh Knesset, among the Jews. He must settle all disagreements and legal conflicts among them. But if there is a case that he is unable to resolve, the matter should be brought before the bishop or before his courtier. The guard at night and the protection of the walls is their responsibility only in the place of their settlement. They may hire midwives and servants from among us. They are permitted to sell as meat that they have slaughtered and will not eat, and it's permitted for Christians to buy it. In sum, I have given them privileges, the likes of which have never been enjoyed by the Jews amongst the towns of the Teutons, so that no man will detract from these rights and conditions or impose a tax upon them, claiming that they themselves have taken these rights and that they were not granted by a bishop. I myself have written these conditions in my own hand and signed them with my own seal, given on the 13th day of September, 1084, on the 12th year of my rule as bishop in this place.
Thank you. So what's going on here? Let's take this apart a little bit so we can analyze it. So in the introduction of the document, Rudiger outlines his interest in bringing Jews to this town of Speyer. He expresses his hope that what's going to happen is the introduction of Jews will transition this from a town to a city. And so the Jews facilitate this process. Look, at the end of the day, he's looking for taxes. All right, if I can increase the size of the city, I've got more people to support the church. It becomes his primary interest is the increase in the local economy. In the second section, he outlines the living conditions that he has personally organized for the Jewish community. Particular emphasis is placed on the subject of protection and self-defense. The burghers, the citizens living in the city, see the Jews as rivals Again, it's economics at place. And therefore, Rudiger assumes that the Jews would want to live apart from the burghers for their own safety. And you're going to see this concept of division between the rulers who want the Jews and the community who does not want the Jews play out over and over. All right. Finance and trade, what he's provided is extremely liberal conditions of trade and minimal responsibilities of revenue. All right. Fourth, religious and communal autonomy. You have the mention of the Arches Synagogus. All right. The Jews are offered significant rights of legal and religious autonomy. Come join us. This is a welcoming community. We want you to be able to live on your own, take care of your own, have your own legal and religious responsibilities. We're going to let you handle your own legal conflicts. We're going to allow you to receive visitors as free men. We're going to allow you to slaughter kosher meat. Okay, that's a key factor for Jews moving into a community. And then they have a free status in that society. They have autonomous rights, including interactions with the Christian society. All right. You have trading listed in the Christian community, in the Christian section of town. You have access to the harbor. All right. Again, a unique feature for Jews in this time. Employment of Christian servants. And we've seen many places before where that's been forbidden to Jews. And the last piece, and this is actually very interesting, is the sale of sale of meat to Christians. Now, why is that significant? Why is kosher beef in particular more expensive than non-kosher beef? And the reality of that is because sections of the cow, by definition, are not kosher. And therefore, when you kill or slaughter a cow, you only have a half to 2/3 of the meat available for sale. All right. And therefore, it's more expensive. If I can turn around and sell the parts of the cow that are not kosher to the Christian community, I can make back some of those losses. All right. Key fact. So, on the one hand, this document offers the Jews a favorable legal status, and that's a positive. Aware of the unique privileges granted to the Jews, Rudiger tries to ward off the opposition who would either assault the Jews against his will or rebuke the privilege but without his consent. And so he is making this clear. He's giving them their own section of town. He wants them there. Plain and simply, he wants them. The burghers, on the other hand, the citizens of the town, view Jews with hostility, partly because they, not only for economic reasons, but also because they support the bishop and other rulers at a time in which the townspeople are struggling to become more independent of their rulers. These people saw the independence of Jews and their reliance on the bishops and kings as proof that Jews were outsiders with special privileges. Doesn't help us. And Jews indeed did support the leaders and the bishops because they understood how vulnerable they were as non-Christians living in a Christian world. All of this changes in 1096. Now again, the bishop privilegium is 1084, so we're only talking 12 years later. In 1096, Pope Urban II calls for a holy war, and all privileges go out the window and the entire society is changed. The First Crusade begins. In terms of numbers of atrocities, the Crusade of 1096 is not a biggie in terms of Jewish history. The numbers are smaller, but what it does is it marks a period of harassment of the Jews in duration and intensity that is unique to Jewish history. It's the beginning. It's the starting point, 1096. There's several books out there whose titles are 1096, and you'll read about the First Crusade. It is a significant year in Jewish history. through this period, before this 1096, Augustinian policy, we've talked about this, dominated the church, and according to this policy, Jews were to be left alone to serve as witnesses of their failure to accept Jesus. Don't harass them and don't force them to convert. They are to be tolerated by the church, but made miserable. The problem with that in a society, and you can see this with racism in our world today, all right? To label a group as heinous, as enemies, to demand for them tolerance, even if it's limited, and is a demand on the human psyche over the long run, all right? You want to keep them in your society and at the same time label them as all these terrible things. It's difficult for the human psyche. In normal times, in normal circumstances, it may allow for an adherence to that kind of behavior. The minute abnormal things happen, there's a heated atmosphere, there's radical sloganeering going on, it begins to destabilize what is and creates a volatile mix. And what emerges afterwards is an explosion of the Augustinian policy. Not only, it's not the church leaders who want to change their attitudes, it's the crowd behavior. It's the behavior of the uneducated who take violence into their own hands and precipitate activity that's not necessarily condoned by the church. I want to emphasize this over and over. The leaders have certain reasons to welcome the Jews into their society. The people in the society do not want the Jews there. November of 1095, all right, in the year 1095, the year before, November, hundreds of religious and political leaders gather in a large open field at the old cathedral in Clermont, a town in France, to hear the Pope speak. Joyce, do you have the document? If you would read reading number 2, this is this one account of what the Pope says.
Let none of your possessions detain you, no solicitude for your family affairs, since this land which you inhabit, shut in on all sides by the seas and surrounded by mountain peaks, the Alps and Pyrenees, is too narrow for your large population, nor does it abound in wealth, and it furnishes scarcely enough food for its cultivators. Hence, it is that you murder one another, that you wage war, and that frequently you perish by mutual wounds. Let therefore hatred depart from among you, let your quarrels end, let wars cease, and let all dissensions and controversies slumber. Enter upon the road of the Holy Sepulchre, wrest that land from the wicked race, the Muslims, and subject it to yourselves.
So in this passionate speech, the Pope calls upon the Christians to take up arms and return Christian holy places in Jerusalem to the church. He promises them that if they participate in this process, their sins would be forgiven. They would go directly to heaven when they die. All right, you can imagine the people hearing this. I mean, as he describes, they've been at war, they've been killing one another. And here's an opportunity to be forgiven all your sins. And so they spread the word to the relatives, the neighbors, the strangers. And within a few months, tens of thousands of Christians, women, children, and men are preparing for a holy war. So the question in mind, and why now? What prompts, why now for the Pope to make this call, and why now are the people ready to adhere to his call? The Muslims had conquered Jerusalem and its holy sites in 638 of a common era. Hundreds of years, 450 years before this. Why does the church wait 450 years to call for a holy war? One of the reasons is that the invasions from the north and east had weakened the Roman church and much of Europe between 638 and 1000. These are the Dark Ages. They're at war, all right? They're at war with many invading little armies. There's no unity at this point. By the 11th century, by the end of the 11th century, Europe is changing, however. The church is becoming more powerful as the unity factor and more willing to respond when Muslim rulers vow to destroy Christian holy sites. And as Urban's speech suggests, he also wants the Christians in Europe to stop fighting among themselves, unite against a common enemy. Right? It's the standard call for unity that unites a people when they're ready to go to war. If you want people to unite, create a common enemy. Jews are also often the basis of that for sure. Urban himself is surprised by the enthusiasm in response. He imagined that there'd be a few powerful rulers who would send soldiers to fight an army under the church's leadership. Several armies were indeed organized, and they did conquer Jerusalem in 1099, 3 years later. However, his speech also ignited a series of events that he neither expected nor wanted. The Pope's call to arm attracted tens of thousands of ordinary people from all walks of life, including, as you might imagine, common criminals. If you're telling me that whatever I do can be, whatever I've done can be forgiven and I can gain acceptance into the church, what a great opportunity for a common criminal. All right. For the most part, the armies headed for the Middle East with little or no preparation. People just got up and left. Instead of bringing sufficient supplies, they scavenged for food and other goods along the way. In a number of places that they arrived, the villagers and the townspeople, Christians and Jews, offered help in order to protect their community from looting. However, most of these communities could barely feed their families. Helping anyone else out was not a possibility, and as a result, there were frequent raids on farms, villages, and towns along the way carried out by the Crusaders. You have a sense of just complete mess as they're just going through towns and taking what they want on their way for their holy place. There's another factor that also encouraged this. There's a change in the perception in the 11th century in the church in their understanding of Jesus. Earlier, Jesus had been understood as this distant figure, this faraway God. It's the Malkeinu, as I might use in the English, in the Hebrew terms, okay? They respected and viewed Jesus with a sense of awe and all-powerful deity, okay? Now, the priests had begun to shift this view of Jesus. And again, in Hebrew, I'd go from Malkeinu to Avinu, from our king to our father, to a much more accessible vision of God and the teachings of Jesus' suffering and his dual role as both humane and divine. All right. They viewed Jesus as somebody who could be identified with the poor and the suffering and the powerless, a man who died died painfully on the cross at the hands of his enemies. And who is responsible for that?
Jews.
Well said. Right. So the question becomes, if the deicide charge is first really entering Christianity at this time, you can imagine a group of crusaders on their way to Jerusalem, to free free Christian sites from Muslim rule. It would be preposterous to just ignore God's worst enemies who are dwelling among us on the way. The logic is clear if the charge of deicide is to arise in its midst. Any comments or questions on that now? I'll stop a couple times along the way. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, Gail.
Yeah, so what occurred to me is why the Catholics have these statues. the crucifix, the displaying of Jesus suffering on the cross. The Protestants don't have that. They use a cross, but they don't have crucifixes in their churches.
All right, so what's the question?
Well, it's not a question. It just occurred to me why the Catholics have these crucifixes and showing Jesus
okay.
dying on the cross, and the Jews have a God that you can't see.
Okay.
And they have a God that they can see, they can relate to.
See and focus on the human element of suffering within their God.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's Catholicism, and Christianity, Protestantism breaks off from that concept. Did the Pope approve of the slaughter? No, the Pope. This is one of the unanticipated. The slaughtering of the Jews along the way is an unanticipated outcome. Again, the Pope is operating still with Augustinian thought in this process. Okay. So May and June of 1096, Pope gives a speech in November of the previous year. May and June 1096, Count Amico, a noble and landowner, leads his followers into a systematic attack of the Jews in the Rhineland. In almost every community, he gives Jews a choice: conversion to Christianity or death. The Crusaders insisted, and this is despite the Pope's words, forced conversions were the will of God. You've got this division between the common member of society and its leaders. The crusade-related anti-Jewish violence explodes in the Rhineland, and it happens with no real warning over a period of only 3 months. It's very, very quick. There was nothing in the Pope's words that would predict this to happen. And so it's little wonder that the Jews of the Rhineland reacted in frenzied ways with no sense of certainty. There's a rapid pace of events that rob them of the time to reflect and kind of decide what to do as a community. They're not having federation meetings to talk about what does a community do here. Everybody's on their own. There's the spontaneous Christian actions necessitate spontaneous Jewish responses. All right, and so you've got the glory of the decisions, you've got the blunders that such improvisations result in. On the morning of May 3rd, 1096, Amico leads a surprise attack on the synagogue in Speyer. When his men burst into the building, they find it empty. Somebody had warned the Jews. Outraged, the soldiers go searching throughout the town. They find and they kill 11 Jews in the town. The current bishop of Speyer, Johann, was determined to live up to the charter that had been written by his predecessor, Bishop Rudiger. Okay, so what he has done is try to protect the Jews here. He uses his own, his own army to escort the Jews of Speyer to a safe place in the countryside. Then after the Crusaders leave town, this bishop tries and punishes all the burghers, all the citizens who had taken part in the killing of the 11 Jews in the town.
Oh.
The Jews in other cities, however, were not nearly as fortunate. This stands out as the exception. The normal means of protection afforded by Jews by their feudal lords proved to be hopelessly ineffectual. The protectors themselves often fled in the face of the Crusaders, fearful of the violence which these Crusaders would engage in. This was not an army. Keep in mind, this is an undisciplined group of people on a mission. This is not necessarily, don't think of an American army at war where everybody listens to the leader. That's not what's playing out here. There's chaos. All right. And so you have a chronicler who writes about the experience of the Jews. We talked about Speyer. Now we're going to talk about Worms, the second city, reading number 3. Lori, do you have the text? Lori Actor, would you read reading number 3?
Chronicler of the events of Worms. Enemies of the Jews plotted craftily against them. They took a trampled corpse of theirs that had been buried 30 days earlier and carried it through the city, saying, "Behold, what the Jews have done to our comrade." They took a Gentile and boiled him in water. They then poured the water into our wells to kill us. When the Crusaders and the burghers heard this, they cried out and gathered, all who bore an unsheathed sword from great to small, saying, "Behold, the time has come to avenge him who was crucified, whom their ancestors slew. Now let not a remnant or a residue escape, even an infant in the cradle."
All right. So you see the accusations. Reality doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be reality in an accusation. You can't prove an all set. The mob kills every Jew who had chosen to remain in the town. 2 weeks later, Amicho and his army turned their attention to those who had found refuge in the bishop's towers. Hopelessly outnumbered, the Jews lost this battle quickly. Within 2 days, more than 800 Jews are killed. Many of the Jews who had survived these initial attacks killed themselves and their children rather than allow the Crusaders to do it to them. Chroniclers would later, this is 1096. The chroniclers, Jewish chroniclers, would later refer to these acts as the sanctification of God's name, as Kiddush Hashem. You have for the first time this concept of sanctifying God's name through the acts of suicide. It's as a label. It wasn't labeled that way at Masada. Next, so that now we've dealt with Spires, we've dealt with Worms. Next, Count Amicho turns his attention to Mainz. And I think at the end of your packet, there's a map so you can see he's sort of working his way north, if I remember correctly. Mainz is the home of the largest Jewish community in the Rhineland. When the armies reach the city, Mainz's burghers open the gates. Once inside, the soldiers head for the archbishop's compound, where most of the Jews, again, had taken refuge. The Jews prepare to defend themselves, expecting support from the archbishop's knights. A chronicler later wrote, reading number 4. Ben Portnoy, do you have the reading? Would you do reading 4 for us?
Well, a typographical error has it as reading 3A.
Okay. This is the, yeah, go ahead.
Enemies of the Jews plotted craftily against them.
Oh, no, that's not what I'm looking for. The Jews all then drew.
The Jews all then drew near to the gate to do battle with the Crusaders and the burghers. The enemy overcame them and captured the gate. The men of the archbishop, who promised to assist, fled immediately in order to turn them over to the enemy, for they are splintered reeds.
All right, so the knights were not ready to defend them. They plain and simply weren't willing to do so. So the Crusaders, again, give the Jews of Mainz the same choice, death or conversion. Almost every Jew chose death. Some simply waited for the Crusaders to kill them. A few tried to escape and were captured and killed. Others, including women and children, took their own lives. You have the chronicler again describing these horrific events. Sarah, would you read reading number 5 for us?
Having broken the locks and knocked in the doors, they seized and killed 700 who vainly sought to defend themselves against forces far superior to their own. The women were also massacred, and the young children, whatever their sex, were put to the sword. The Jews, seeing the Christians rise as enemies against them and their children, with no respect for the weakness of age, took arms in turn against their co-religionists, against their wives, their children, their mothers, and their sisters, and massacred their own. A horrible thing to tell of. The mothers seized the sword, cut the throats of their children at their breasts, choosing to destroy themselves with their own hands, rather to succumb to the blows of the uncircumcised.
Okay, I just want to point out something about, well, how were the Christians referred to here?
The
Last word.
Uncircumcised.
Uncircumcised. There is a paragraph in the Amidah that we recite on Shabbat. It says, it uses the term arelim. it says Shabbat was not given to the Arelim, the uncircumcised. In an earlier edition of the Siddur in the conservative movement, it changed that word and to the Rishaim, to the evil. If you look back in the Silverman Siddur, it's Shabbat was not given to those who are evil. For some reason, our current Siddur has gone back to the term Arelim, not given Shabbat to the uncircumcised. If you hear me repeat the Amidah in our synagogue, you will hear me, even though the term is written Arelim, I say Rishaim. Because I'm not looking to create what was meant to be a polemic against Christianity at a time of causing Jewish suffering. And so I've returned, even though the word in the Siddur is Arelim, I continue to use the word Rishaim, the evil. And if it was good enough for Siddur that I grew up with, I guess it's good enough. And so I have precedent to allow me to do that. Everybody can have their own interpretation. To help understand these responses of Kiddush Hashem, of killing one's family and oneself, you have to be aware of the Talmudic dictum that stipulates when faced with alternatives of transgression of the law or death, Jews are expected to break Jewish law with 3 exceptions. So for example, again, if someone says to you, if you've been in my classes, you've heard me use this before, someone says to you, either you eat this pork or I will kill you, it's lunchtime. Okay? It's clear. Now, as a cantor, I would tell you, don't you dare enjoy it, but eat it. Okay? However, there are 3 exceptions to that in which you're supposed to give up your life. One is public idolatry. The second is shedding of blood. In other words, if you're told either you kill this person or I will kill you, you are to give up your life. And the third is gross sexual immorality. All right, essentially adultery. Think of it in those terms. Either you sleep with this married person or I will kill you. And that's the third. So it's idolatry, it's murder, and it's adultery. Those are the 3 for which a Jew is expected to give up one's life. Given the prevailing medieval sense that due to the dogma of the Trinity, which is for the Jew and for the Muslim of the time, it is idolatry, it's multiple gods. Okay, the implications for the Jews were straightforward according to Jewish law. It was to require them to respond with the radical choice of death. There's another, and with that, at the moments like this, you see the Bible. We always turn to the Bible for some sort of reference point. And in Jewish thinking of the time, the Akedah, the near sacrifice of Isaac by Abraham, was more than simply a moving tale. It is the highest, for the Jews of the time, the highest manifestation of human acceptance of God's will. Abraham says yes and goes willingly to sacrifice his son. And so there's an ability in following this law of requiring one to choose death to remove all doubts about this identification when one has to kill one's child. They turn to the story of the Akedah as being able to identify with biblical precedent. It's a very difficult concept for sure. By the fall of 1096, almost all the Crusaders had moved on, some to Jerusalem, some back to their home. However, this massacre of 1096 considerably changes the political status of Jews and affects their religious and social identity and thinking. From this point on, they are more insecure about living amongst their Christian brethren, because suddenly it's not humiliation, it's death as the ultimate outcome. Comments, thoughts?
Mark, I have a question.
Yes.
The chroniclers, who chronicled the slaughters in the Rhineland, was that firsthand? Was that passed down? What do we know about the ones who chronicled the accounts?
So I know at least some of them were later. So I have to imagine it's a blend of both, that there's some who write in the time. I would bet the great majority are writing retrospectively, however. Is that consistent with your understanding, Aaron?
Yeah, that's what I understand.
Yeah. That while people are being slaughtered, it's not common for somebody to be sitting there with a pen. Okay, and so it's usually after the events that people tell them. So
The pen is not mightier than the sword in that particular case.
not in that moment, that's for sure. I love it. Great. I'm going to keep that one and use it. Thank you. A year later, what's that? Yes.
I have a question about, I guess, location.
Uh-huh.
It says chronicler Albert of Aix. Now, where was Aix? I'm used to Aix-en-Provence in southern France, but you're saying this was more in what we now know as Germany?
No, he's writing where he's writing. It may be in southern France. He may have been there and moved. Okay, it doesn't mean the events happened there, right? Because that plays into what Aaron just said. It's often written later.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. In 1097, a year later, Henry IV returns to Germany from his lands in Italy. Almost immediately, this is a unique situation. He issues an edict allowing the Jews who were forced to convert to return to Judaism. He also restores Jewish property to its rightful owners. But as this, and in citing this, I'm citing the exception, the very rare exception in majority, when the few Jews who chose baptism over death wished to return to Judaism after the Crusaders passed their city, they were prohibited from doing so. We'll talk a lot about that when we get to the Inquisition. All right. This prohibition of returning to Judaism is formalized by a bull issued by Pope Innocent III in September of 1201. The popes may not have accepted and not promoted conversion by force, but once the conversion took place, you were a Christian, and returning to Judaism made you a heretic. All right. On the Jewish side, this is where you see Rashi stepping in as well. Rashi takes a lenient stand towards the return penitents, those who converted and want to come back. And it's a contrast with the more severe rabbinic opinions. He is the one, and this is where you get the concept of born a Jew, always a Jew. It comes in response to the Crusades, and Rashi is the one who issues the order. As for justice, as to those who inflicted the pain on the Jews, it's only in Speyer, that small little community I spoke of, none were brought to justice. The vast majority of the people responsible for the attacks went free, and Christians quickly learned that despite the words of the kings and the rulers, there's no consequences for killing Jews. You can get away with it. What you see after the first crusade is some resumption of their former existence by the Jews in the following decades. However, 50 years later, in 1145, there came a call for a second crusade, and once again, preachers sought to rouse Christians to begin the crusade by attacking Jews. In France, you have reading number 6. Let's see, where are we? Jeff, do you have the text?
No. What is the good of going to the ends of the world at great loss of men and money to fight the Saracens when we permit among us other infidels 1,000 times more guilty towards Christ than the Mohammedans?
Okay, pretty clear. All right, by the fall of 1146 through the spring of 1147, attacks on Jews in the Rhineland and northern France mount. Cologne, Speyer, Mainz, Würzburg, Carentan, I think it's Ramerup, and Sully in France. Another chronicler reports reading number 7. Judith, would you read that? Judith Kaplan.
Unmute myself, sorry. In the villages, they transversed the Crusaders, killed or forced baptism upon what remained of those impious Jews, who were truly enemies which the church tolerates in its bosom. For those who were a certain number that returned to Judaism, even as dogs to their own vomit.
It's pretty
Strong.
blatant.
Yeah, strong.
Pretty strong. All right. And then and later in the 12th century, there's a third crusade. I just realized what time it is. So I'm going to move along because I got 5 minutes before I have to get to the kids at the religious school. Money lending. By the end of the 11th century, Jews are squeezed out of the international trade and into occupations that are forbidden to Christians, Jews, and Muslims. That's banking, money lending, and currency exchange. All right, all three religions regard the idea of charging interest on loan as usury, which is a sin. Although the Jews initially tried to avoid money lending, when you take away every other possibility of earning a living, you end up with few options. All right, and so they ended up taking on these roles. This process of turning Jews into money lenders is gradual, but nearly everywhere in process, it pushes Jews to the margins of society and leads to a stereotype of greedy and money hungry. And additionally, because they know that usury is prohibited under Jewish law, Christians then see this as proof that Jews are unfaithful to their very own laws. You can't trust a Jew. He won't even follow his own laws. They make it impossible for Jews to hold other jobs, make it so that the Christians can now blame Jews for charging interest on loans. Okay? Nobles also keep a tight rein on their Jews, whom they need to help finance wars and to build their cathedrals and palaces and their roads. They expect Jews to pay extra taxes. There's a Jew tax above and beyond everyone else, and to lend them money at a low rate of interest or no interest at all. So how does a Jew survive? If I'm doing I have no other jobs, I can't charge the nobles really any interest to make any money. The only way I'm going to survive is to charge high interest rates to the larger population. You know that is not a formula for being loved. And so the Jews are caught in a trap that they can't get out of. One last issue, and that's the demonic image of the Jew. During this time, Christian scholars are anxious to explain the role of the devil in the terrestrial and celestial spheres. According to Thomas Aquinas, demons could assume carnal form. And so not surprisingly, therefore, during this period, Jews are accused of possessing attributes of both the devil and of witches. They're depicted as possessing horns, tails, and the beard of a goat, and they're accused of producing a terrible odor. They are a subspecies of human beings. They're viewed as suffering from malignant diseases, which, and here's this, you'll hear the echo right away, the only cure from these diseases is Christian blood. Hello, matzah. Okay? Jews were viewed as magicians par excellence and able to work magic against their Christian contemporaries. And so you have these concepts would then become the basis for the charges that we'll look at in 2 lessons, the desecration of the host, I'm sorry, it's next week, the desecration of the host and ritual murder. Last thing I want to point out, and then we'll call it quits, is that remember the great majority of these people are not literate. Their only exposure to Christian thought is through sermons being preached and through theater, through art. And so those who are producing this anti-Semitic information, there's no way for the great majority of the people to know anything else. I'm not letting them off the hook. I'm trying to understand. Okay, they have no other information. They are poor. They feel they are being abused by others coming into their community. And so Jews are viewed as the personification of evil. They are either devils or the devil himself. They are butchered without remorse because of that. They're the vermin of the earth, a contagion on the body of Europe. I have time for about one or two questions.
I have just a quick comment. You're talking
Please.
about being money lenders. I recently heard, and I haven't checked it out to be sure it's true, but that Isabella and Ferdinand of Spain went to Jewish money lenders to finance
Yes.
Columbus's
trips,
trip.
yes.
And that
Yes.
when Columbus returned, he didn't go first to the king and queen. He went first to the money lenders to give them a report.
That I hadn't heard, but the first piece is yes, absolutely.
So yeah, that's a clear
The specific on
example.
Columbus, I don't know. I have not heard that. Anybody else? Okay, all right. The only thing I would say to you about that concept is that by the time Columbus returns, the Jews have been expelled. So
Yes.
I'm not
This,
sure what.
this was said by a man, this was a long time ago, but I read it. It was said by a man who was talking about various things, including the economic problems of Spain ever since they expelled the Jews.
Mhm. Right. Oftentimes, communities that have expelled the Jews have come back to suffer, and there are those who want them back. There's no question about that. The date Columbus leaves, his ship leaves, is basically 3 days after the expulsion is formally put into place. And so the Jews were running out of Spain at the time. There were probably Jews on Columbus's ship. We know that the likelihood is his navigator was at least a Jew, if not others. So when he returns, I'm not sure who the money lenders would be, and if they were willing to identify themselves. That's another question. So I don't know. I can't tell you that's not true. It doesn't sit comfortably with me. And if somebody else has more information, I'm certainly open.
Yeah, that's why I said I never really checked it out.
Yeah, I'm not going to tell you it's not true. It just doesn't sit comfortably for me with my knowledge of the times. Okay, with that, everybody, we're off next week. Enjoy your turkeys or whatever it is you eat for Thanksgiving. For those of you who are meatless and whatever the kind of turkey you eat, enjoy it. I hope everybody has a good week, please, and good health. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. And at that point, we'll look at some of the accusations against Jews at this time, as I called it, the lies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Bye-bye.
Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanksgiving, everyone. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Elise. Thank you, Elise, for
Happy
everything.
Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Bye-bye.